And now let me welcome on to the show Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton. Leonard, what's going on, man? How you doing? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing just fine. I'm always in looking forward to talking a little hoops.
So let me ask you this before we start about this specific team. I think the most impressive thing about your program is you've been able to have first-round picks on your roster, back-to-back years, top 5 picks on your roster that have accepted roles and have been willing to come off the bench. What is it about the program and the culture that you've built that has allowed that to be successful? Because that's not going to happen everywhere.
Well, first you have to understand, realistically, 98% of all the players that go to the NBA, they go in as role players.
Mm-hmm.
You only have, 10, 15, maybe 20 really, really bona fide superstars that carry the programs, even at the highest level of the NBA. So in reality, those guys, we're just training them to be what they want to become. Now, when you look back over the years, I tried to emulate guys like Red Auerbach. Red Auerbach won 9 straight NBA titles. Now, understand what I just said. 9 straight NBA titles with a deep bench and a deep rotation. Remind you, John Havlicek never started the game. He's Hall of Famer. He came off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, him playing K.C. Jones and Sam Jones and Zach Sanders and Don Nelson and all those 12 players that he played just about every game, everybody thought he was a genius. But now that we try to emulate the same type of system, it seems to be somewhat odd because, years ago, you would play 7 players and 8 at the most. You walk the ball down the court, you pick up at the top of the key, or you play zone defense, and we don't do that. We have a fast-paced offensive system. We play a extremely aggressive defensive system, and that requires more quality of depth. If we play guys 35 minutes in the way that we want to play, by February, they wouldn't have anything left. So in order for us to be effective, plus I've always had jobs that need to be a little fixing up a little bit at Oklahoma State, Miami, Florida State. If we played the same way everybody else played, then I'm not real sure we'd have very much success. I've been in conferences with some of the most rich, traditional, successful basketball programs, well-established Hall of Fame coaches. I mean, the Big East, John Thompson, John Colissimo, Boeheim, Calhoun, Massimino, those Colissimo. So what I'm saying to you, I've had to develop a system that works for where I've been. Our system is a little different. We play 94 feet on defense. We push the ball and try to be as aggressive as we can offensively. You can't play that way if you're only playing 7, 8 guys. And if you go back and look at the statistics and the numbers, those guys who were drafted who didn't play, they played starters minutes. And I think it's also healthy when everyone else is playing their rotation guys that we got some of our best players on the floor. So I like to have really good players in the second rotation so that, we still can be effective. And that's our system. And our guys, we try to recruit guys who fit who we are, who accept the way we want to play. And when you look back at it, we've had 3 straight years, Fiondu Kabengele, Pat Williams, and as well as Scotty Barnes. Those guys saw the benefit of maybe watching for a couple of minutes, warming up on the bicycle and being ready to go and better prepared. And it's working for us. And let's try to keep that a secret. I don't want anybody else to try to emulate us.
So I think it's a really interesting point you made about guys accepting roles when they get to the NBA, because I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think it helps. Everyone's playing 20 minutes, right? You got 10 guys on that roster. They're going to play 20 minutes. Whether or not you're starting, coming off the bench, you're going to get that number of minutes. I think that helps. I also think it's interesting, and we can get in your team into this team in 1 second, but I do want to ask you about your defense, because I love watching you guys defend. The communication, the way that you switch, the way that you can put you had a guy that was built like a defensive end last year in Raekwon Gray that could guard point guards and could guard centers. You had Scotty Barnes defending people 94 feet. I love the way that you guys defend. How long does it take you to get when you bring a new player into the program to get them kind of acclimated and to get them to kind of figure out exactly what you want them to do?
Well, what we try to do, we try to match mindset, skill set, and character with the way we want to play. Most of the guys who find themselves attracted to Florida State's program are interested in playing the way we want to play. I really don't have that much of a challenge getting guys to adjust because we try to match physical skills, talents with the way we want to play, and that eliminates a lot of adjustment for a lot of players, and it's been working pretty well. And if you can keep that a secret, I'd appreciate it too.
I'll do that as well. All right, so let's talk about this year's team. I think it's the ultimate sign of respect that Florida State, despite losing, I believe it was 3 starters plus Scotty Barnes, still right there in the conversation with the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Virginias and everybody else in the ACC when it comes to predicting who's going to be the best team in the conference this year. We have you ranked right outside the top 20. I think that there's going to be a lot of other places that have you ranked inside the top 15. And I think it's a sign of the continuity that you're able to develop and what people think of the program itself as opposed to just specific teams that you build. So let's talk about some of the guys you got. You got Caleb Mills coming in, you got Jalen Warley coming in, you got Matthew Cleveland coming in. Which one of these newcomers do you expect to have the biggest impact?
Well, I think that's how you guys normally predict or judge, make your judgments for the upcoming season. And we in a conference with some of the most successful winners programs in the history of college basketball. And that's normally they have that distinction to call themselves the Blue Bloods. Well, obviously, they have 75 years of successful tradition ahead of Florida State. In other words, when Florida State was in independent, when they were in the Dixie Conference, in the Metro Conference, the ACC, the Big Ten, Big East people, they were in the conference getting the exposure. So we don't normally get that level of respect at the beginning of the year because we have not earned it like some of the schools who got that publicity early on. So maybe some of the players that we recruit are not quite as popular, and you don't know quite who they are and where they're from. And normally at the beginning of the season, people have a tendency to revert back to the old tradition, the thought process. But normally at the end of the season, we find a way to carve ourselves into that group of guys that are kind of hanging around at the end of the season with opportunities. And that's the journey that we're on. So I think we're a little better than what most people think, and you expect those well-established programs to keep going on. They lose players, and you if you don't know anything, if you're a writer and you're voting, you kind of revert back to what always has happened. And we're not in that category yet. I love our team. I think we're ready. We lost some very good players last year. I think 4 of them might be in the NBA or in the D League or something of that area. Scotty was the 4th pick in the draft, and MJ Walker and is with the next team, and the other two, Balsa and Gray were drafted in the 2nd round. But I think our beat goes on. We kind of carved a little niche for ourselves. This team will be similar to some of the teams we've had in the past. And you mentioned the incoming freshman, but we have Malik Osborne. We think Anthony Polite is really, really solid. Raquan Evans, very little about. We think he's going to be ready to give us good leadership. And I think we win games by committing. We call ourselves 18 strong. That's who we are. And I think that's been the strength of our program.
Yeah, Anthony Polite, I don't think that he's missed a shot in his college basketball career yet. That kid could really knock it down. Caleb Mills is a guy that's interesting to me because I think he brings a little bit of a different dynamic to your roster this year in terms of just having someone that can go out and get a bucket, right? There's a lot of guys that kind of fit into the system that you play. It feels like he's a guy that can kind of break somebody down. You get it to the end of a clock and give him the ball and say, go make something happen. And he can do that. He was really, really good for a couple of years at Houston before moving on to Florida State. So what have you seen out of him, and what are you expecting out of him this season?
Well, he's actually surprised me, to be very honest with you, with his defense ability and his unselfish spirit. The fact that he can create not only for himself, he can create for his teammates. He brings a different dynamic. I mean, he's locked and loaded now. He's a good scorer. There's no doubt about that. But I didn't expect him to take such great pride in the way he defends. And he's a great teammate, and he gives you tremendous effort. Most of the time when you see guys who are that offensively gifted, sometimes the defense and creating for others is not something that they think about as much because they're being so gifted that in order for their teams to be successful, they've had to just go out and get buckets. But this guy now, he has something unique and special about him. I'm excited about him. Matthew Cleveland
Mhm.
is a high energy, tremendously focused. Not only is he a straight A student, but tremendous character. This guy's a gym rat, and he just loves every moment he's on the court. And they bring a mentality that's consistent with the reason we've been able to be successful, both of those guys. And Worley is just a guy who's learning. But we try. Those guys are humble guys. Guys ask a lot of questions. They're good team guys, and they are coming in with the right type of attitude, along with the quality. They help us have the quality of depth that allows us to play, like you said earlier, full court man-to-man defense, switching 1 through 5. They're long, they're lean, they're athletic. But the unique thing about those guys, they're humble, they're learning, they're great teammates. And I think that kind of really, really bodes well for the system that we try to utilize.
Yeah, it seems like you guys have had a lot of success identifying not just talented basketball players, but high character kids that are going to kind of fit in, but like I said, with the culture that you have developed. It's been a lot of fun to watch you grow it. I do have to ask you about John Butler, because that's the guy that I keep hearing about. 7'1", probably 180 pounds, soaking wet. What can you tell me about him and the impact he's having? I keep hearing, are you going to play him at the 2? That's what people keep telling me. Watch out for the 7'1" shooting guard that Florida State.
Well, we only really have one identified position, and that's our post player.
Mm-hmm.
Us and everyone else is interchangeable. And that's basically our offensive system. Everybody brings the ball. Whoever gets the rebound is the point guard in that possession. Even though John's 7'1", he's skilled enough that he has no problem dribbling the ball, passing the ball, shooting threes. He is a youngster that needs to grow and mature physically.
Mm-hmm.
That's not one of his strong zones, but I think that'll come. We all have a different biological development clock. So some of us start gaining weight after we're 35 and 40, like me. But John is an eager learner. He's a humble youngster. He fits right in with the character of the guys that we've had in the past. I like what I see in him. He is potentially a unique special player. He's not quite there yet. You can't be 7'1" coming in 180 pounds and as physical as the game is. He's so tall. But you watch him over the years, you're gonna see him. You're gonna enjoy watching him grow and develop in the system that we utilize.
Yeah, it seems like you quite often find some of those guys that maybe don't look like the positions that they'll play. Like I said, Raekwon Gray looked like a defensive end. You had him out there. He could run the point a little bit. So you mentioned post players as your defined position. I think that replacing Balsa is going to be one of the tougher things that you guys have to do this year. Talk to me a little bit about Tanner. Talk to me a little bit about Naheem. Talk to me about Quincy. Which one of these guys has kind of impressed you so far in the preseason? And who do you think can kind of take a step forward and be that big 7 foot whatever presence that you guys have at the rim?
The post player position in our system is probably the most challenging position for anyone to adjust to in our system. Most big guys, they go block to block, holding their hand up, want you to throw the ball in there. And our post guys really initiate our offense. They set screens and drag screens in transition. And in the half court, we expect them to set 3, sometimes 4 screens of possession. Mm-hmm. And it's a bigger mental and emotional adjustment for them. And it's also physically exhausting when you not only run to the front of the rim in transition, but when we get in the half court, you got to set side screens, step up screens, corner screens, re-angle screens. And those guys got to be really, really active. And they need a lot of energy. That's why we have to have several of them, because they basically initiate our offense. And so this is a big adjustment for those guys. And you find most players reverting back to who they have always been. In other words, you don't change sometimes. It takes a long time for you, to change to being what you want to become. And in our system, we need those guys returning the ball, reversing the ball, going on dribble handoffs, setting screens for everybody, and rolling to the front of the rim with aggressiveness. And when you don't get it, go to the other side and set another screen. It's tough. That's why sometimes we have to play that position by committee. The luxury we have is that we have 3 guys to play in that position, and then we always can move Malik Osmond to the 5 when we need to. because we won the championship with him playing the 5. But he's a really good perimeter shooter, and Malik is, and so he has that versatility. He gives a big power forward at 6'9", but a guy who can really shoot the ball from the perimeter. But he's also big enough that when we want to go small, so to speak, we're not going too small. We're going from like 7 foot to 6'9", and with a 3-point shooter. So that kind of gives us a little versatility and the ability to make adjustments during the course of the game.
Yeah, I was going to say your small balls when you have 7'1" John Butler and 6'9" Malik Osborne in your front court, right? So it's not exactly like you're playing that small. I do think it's important with the way that you built this team that I mentioned everybody that's going to be kind of on your roster. So we've talked a little bit about Malik. I haven't asked you about Cameron Fletcher. I haven't asked you about Raekwon Evans, and I haven't asked you about Wyatt Wilkes. What have you seen out of those guys, and who are you kind of counting on to maybe take a step forward this season?
Well, you very seldom ever see Wyatt Wilkes miss 2 shots in a row. I mean, he's just a phenomenal shooter. I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia of everything that we do in our basketball program. It's like he spends more time coaching than the coaches ourselves. He's just that knowledgeable of our system. So he's a very important guy in our system. Raekwon Evans is a consummate point guard. He's very unselfish. He gives tremendous effort. He's an unselfish guy he's not a very excuse me, he doesn't speak with a lot of aggressiveness, but he's extremely knowledgeable, and our guys really listen to everything that he says, because he's been around there 3 years, and he's been a great guy to help Worley make his adjustments. He makes great decisions with the ball. And I'm very, very pleased with the contribution and the potential that he's shown that he's capable of doing.
All right, so I'm going to end it with this. I've gotten to know Sly a little bit.
One more person. Who was the other person you asked about?
Oh, Cameron Fletcher. Sorry,
Cameron. I think his best basketball is ahead of him.
I agree.
Extremely good athlete, high energy, offensively and defensively. He's a good fit. His skill set is a great fit for the way we want to play. I mean, he naturally wants to defend you 94 feet. That's just his nature. He really runs the floor. Now he has to learn our system and adjust. And so I'm really pleased with the potential that he has. And he just really adds to our depth because he's big enough and strong enough. The play don't. I mean, we don't have a position maybe, but if we want to go small, we can play him at the 4 position if we have to, in y'all terminology. But he's improved his perimeter shooting. He's kind of a aggressive guy who's a risk taker, and I like guys like that. He'll make a few mistakes, but I think the good outweighs the bad. Yeah,
it feels like he's a guy that just kind of needed a fresh start after leaving Kentucky. So I'm rooting for him. All right, so
and Quincy Ballard, the only one I guess we haven't discussed. Quincy is probably our best athlete in terms of being a 6'11" running, jumping guy. He's probably the least experienced coming out of high school, but I think he's gonna be pleased with the progress he's making, along with Naheem McLeod, the 7'3" guy who played at the community college here, local community college, Chipola, and they went to the I think the elites. Junior college national tournament last year. I mean, he brings a unique skill set. He's ambidextrous. He shoots with his right hand. He writes with his left. He's those guys who have that mindset. They seem to be able to, especially as a center. Can you imagine being able to go equal as effective over both shoulders? Mm-hmm. He's a good athlete, but once again, at 7'4", he hasn't had to be as active as he's had to be in our system. Our centers are like point centers. They initiate everything that we do. But we have a full complement of players. I hope we haven't missed anybody, because to be very honest with you, even our walk-ons, they contribute with the green team. So we have a full complement of guys that's involved in our system.
So I'm going to end it with this. I've gotten to know CY a little bit this offseason. We did the little Candy Coaches series thing over the summer, and he taught me something. I need your rating on this to tell me if I'm doing a good job with this. All right. New Bloods. How was that? Was that good?
That was pretty close. And, I'm hoping that he can turn that over to some of our players, because sometimes he gets carried away, and we be in the tunnel getting ready to go out. He be screaming new blood, and all the players be echoing it, and it'd be time to go out in the court and warm up. I'd be saying, "Hey, you see why you hold us up, baby?" He gets carried away, but he brings a lot of energy. I have the greatest staff with Stan Jones and Steve Smith, along with C.Y. Young on our staff. I had the greatest staff on planet Earth, and I'm glad you gave him a shout out.
Yeah, he doesn't. He gets enough attention as it is. He didn't need my shout out. But I had to make sure that I wanted to make sure I'm doing it right. I got to make sure.
Look, you're close enough. Okay.
Well, listen, Leonard, I appreciate the time. Best of luck this season.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up for Bet Rivers yet, now is the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, it's more secure, and it's more reliable. Now that basketball season is tipping off, get in on the action at betrivers.com today, or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And while I got you here, let's talk about the Field of 68 Media Network, where college basketball matters most all year round. This is a digital media and podcast network that we've been building over the course of the last year. We have shows hosted by some of your favorite players covering the program that they love the most. AJ Guyton hosts the House of Hoosier. Eric Devendorf covers Syracuse on the Scorer's Table. Dan Dickow hosts the Gonzaga Bulldog broadcast. We have Florida's Patrick Young and Duke's Andre Dawkins and North Carolina's Shammond Williams and Michigan's Stu Douglas and Illinois' Deion Thomas. The list goes on and on and on. We have more than 30 shows right now. So hit the links below and check them all out. And while you're at it, make sure that you go check out the Field of 12 Media Network, your home for college football. That was Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton. And I am now thrilled to be joined by two guys that know this Florida State basketball team as well as anyone. We have from the ACC Network, Terrence Oglesby, the former Clemson guard, and Florida State beat writer, Ira Schoffel. Ira, T.O., what's going on, guys? How we doing?
Glad to be here, man.
I'm glad to have a legend like Ira on the pod. That makes me happy more than anything.
Sounds good. I'll roll with that.
There you go.
All right. So I think the first place to start with Florida State is it does kind of feel like this is a program that can consistently win despite having quite a bit of turnover among their ranks, right? They're turning out these guys. Scotty Barnes, everyone thought was going to be a one and done, but I don't think many people necessarily thought Patrick Williams is going to be a one and done. I don't know how many people thought Devin Vassell was going to be a two and done. So Ira, what is it about the way that Leonard builds his program that he's able to kind of recycle these guys over and over and kind of get these new pieces in and keep the thing moving forward despite losing players earlier than he expects?
It is really remarkable, you look at this team this year and you say, man, how are they going to replace 4 of their top 5 scorers, several of their top rebounders, defenders, guys who have been in the program. You do have some of the one and done guys, but you also had, Raekwon Gray, who is a program guy. You had guys that have just been through this program and were kind of glued for it. So you start to wonder about that. And they bring in a lot of talent, but then you think back to, okay, the year before they had to replace 3 of their top 4 scorers. The year before that, I think they replaced 6 seniors. So this is kind of what they've done now. They found this sweet spot. I think Leonard Hamilton, Stan Jones, that's CY and that staff have found a sweet spot of program guys. Like on this year's team, you got the Wyatt Wilkses and Anthony Polites and some of those guys, Raekwon Evans, who's been here for a couple of years now. And then you get the young talent, the new talent, some transfers in this case, and it becomes a pretty good mix. And it's really been their recipe the last few years.
Well, you're exactly right. And, with Raekwon Gray leaving and Anthony Polite staying around, he's still able to mix in so many of this fresh young talent that's kind of turned into their go-to scorers. And they had one guy over the past 4 years that was kind of the go-to guy when they needed a shot or something like that with MJ Walker, who is now moved on to the professional ranks. But they get one with Caleb Mills, who he may or may not be able to stay a very long time, but he's not your typical big body scorer that goes high in the draft. He's somebody that could stay around and be a college player that averages a lot of points over the next 2 or 3 years. And you're absolutely right. And one of the reasons why Florida State guys go so high is because they have so many guys playing and they don't play heavy minutes. So I talked to an NBA scout last week. He said, the great thing about what Leonard Hamilton's doing is he's playing guys about 10, 15 minutes. And what happens is they get in there, they hit 2 shots, the scouts start salivating, and then he yanks them right back out. It's almost like he protects them from themselves. And when you have endless talent, like Coach Hamilton does, and with the way all the assistants, CY, Steve Smith, all the way those guys are recruiting, you can afford to do that.
Yeah, the other part of it is that he teaches a defense that's really similar to kind of what some of the concepts are in the NBA in terms of everyone's got to switch. Everyone's got to be able to guard 5 positions. You have Scotty Barnes at 6'7" with the 7'1" wingspan kind of playing the point and guarding opposing point guards for 94 feet. So it does kind of feel like, especially defensively, he builds a system that is similar to the NBA. The other part of it, Ira, is that when you have guys that are playing 18, 19, 20 minutes, when you have top 5 picks that are coming off of the bench in back-to-back seasons, it teaches players that they kind of have to accept a role. Like they're not going to be bigger than the program. They're going to be a part of a team. And I think the NBA teams really do appreciate guys that can kind of accept a role.
I mean, you think back to, really when this run was really starting for them in earnest. I think, Fiondu Kabengele was a guy who redshirted. And I remember in preseason practice the next year, he lost some weight, got his body right. And I remember in preseason practice, they were going through some stuff. And Xavier Ratton-Mays, who had already graduated but came back and was watching them, he was just working out. And he yelled out to Coach Hamilton from across the court, "You better enjoy this year. You're only going to get one with this guy," but this is a guy who redshirted the year before. And I think the key to that is, and to your point, he gets them to understand what their plan is. Like he sets up a plan for each guy when they come in. This is how we envision you developing. And it may be a 4-year plan. It may be a 5-year plan. It may be a 2-year plan or a 1-year plan, but those guys have realistic expectations. And I think what that does is you don't have a situation where a guy comes in and gets frustrated because he's not getting enough minutes. He's not getting enough shots. Hey, Coach Hamilton told me year 2 is going to be my year, or year 3 is going to be my year. And I think they buy into that, and then the players preach it. And that's really I think what's been the key is, some of those glue guys, I do worry a little bit down the road. I know we're talking about this year, but, Anthony Polite and Malik Osborne and some of those guys who have been through it, when they move on, they're going to need that next generation of guys who can kind of keep that together.
Yeah. So you mentioned Anthony Polite and Malik Osborne. There are, if I'm doing the math right, 5 redshirt seniors on this team. T.O. And to me, I think, you talk about this all the time. The most important thing in college basketball is being old and being able to kind of have that balance between a lot of veteran players and a lot of young talent. And I think we kind of see that balance with this Florida State team, right?
Yeah, and I love Anthony Polite. I mean, he shoots the ball at such an incredible rate. I think he's one of the better defensive players in the entire country, not just the ACC. He really gets down and guard. He's got really good size. And the crazy thing is when you watch Florida State, he's one of the smaller guys on the court. Where he's 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is, Ira. And he plays so well on or off the ball. They've got so many different guys. And Malik Osborne, he doesn't get enough credit, man. A rugged defender. He's turned himself into a good enough floor spacer to where people actually have to guard him. Mixing that high-level freshman talent with older guys, it just seems to be a revolving door of guys that are program first, me second. And then for the most part, these guys are really rewarded after it's all said and done.
So, Ira, of the freshmen that are coming in, we got Jalen Warley, we got Matthew Cleveland, we have John Butler, who I know T.O. loves. Who are these guys that you are kind of expecting to step in and make an impact this season?
Yeah, John Butler's funny, and T.O.'s very familiar with him, I'm sure. But, he's a guy that when he signed, when he committed as a 7-footer, in our article about him, we called him a center. And, somebody on the staff called me pretty quickly and was like, "Hey, man, he ain't a center. He's Jonathan Isaac is what he is." And so that's the kind of guy. I mean, that's what they love. They love that stretch floor, real, long and athletic, but can shoot it. And he's, the only concern when you see him, he's so skinny. You wonder how he's going to hold up physically because he needs to put on a lot of weight. But they'll get him in that strength program and they'll develop him. Matthew Cleveland, to me, is the guy that's probably most ready to make a big contribution of the freshmen. Mm-hmm. They have the transfers as well. But Matthew Cleveland, such a super smart kid, really bright, dynamic athlete, can score in a lot of different ways, loves to defend, wants to play basketball the right way. I mean, you couldn't ask for, if you're bringing in a freshman that's got a ton of talent. I think you couldn't ask for all the intangibles in terms of intelligence, work ethic, all those things. Then they get Matthew Cleveland, and I think he's got a chance to be really special.
Well, you look at the guys that they recruit. I mean, Leonard Hamilton, he's got a type. Even Jalen
Right.
Worley, who we didn't even mention. I mean, a 6'5", 6'6" point guard, very switchable, smart with the ball. I talked to an assistant down there. I asked, I was like, is this Trent Forrest? He said, maybe with time. He said, it might take a little bit of time. He's not Trent Forrest yet, but with time, he could be. John Butler Jr., don't be surprised if you see him in spells this year playing the 2 and the 3 position. I mean, he's that kind of guy. When I first saw him, I was like, man, that's Austin Day, who played at Gonzaga some years ago. Really slender, ultra skilled, but I think Butler actually handles the ball. Doesn't shoot it quite like Day does, but he's got good feet. He moves really well. He's shifty with the basketball. He's going to have to learn to play the college game. It's going to take him a second, but he might be, it might take a couple of years for his body to catch up with the physicality than what is needed. But he is a special talent, especially if he has the mental piece to play for somebody like Coach Hamilton and able to pick up that defensive system quick. Going with Matthew Cleveland, what's he have, a 7'3", 7'4" wingspan? He's got some of the longest arms I've ever seen. He's got excellent size. He's skilled enough. And you're absolutely right. From a physical standpoint, he is imposing, and he fits exactly what Florida State likes to do. Switches 1 through 4, and I think he does it pretty easily.
Yeah, and from what I'm hearing defensively, is they've got guys. This is a group that really wants to guard people. Now they've got to learn it. You mentioned it before. It's there's a lot to playing defense the way they want to do it. There's so much teamwork, so many rules and discipline, but these are the guys that want to guard, and he's certainly one of them.
Yeah. The only concern I would have with the defensive team, that I think Balsa Koprivica was relied on so much defensively to come over on help side. They've got 3. They got Tenorin Gam, Naheem McLeod, and Quincy Ballard. Those 3, all bigger than 7 feet. Are they going to be able to have the kind of defensive impact that Koprivica had? That's my question, because Koprivica, he was huge, but he was also a really smart defender, especially position-wise. And offensively, he was relied on a lot too. They're not going to have that piece in the middle that is as reliable as he was. And that can worry you some. But then again, this Florida State team isn't a team that's help side heavy because they don't have to be. Everybody guards the ball so well. Mm-hmm. So really, if you're going to beat this Florida State team, you better be able to break them down off the dribble, because they're going to take you out of everything you try to do anyway.
Yeah, that's the one thing. It's almost like they're playing a 2-3 zone, but it's like it's matchup. It's a weird defense, and I don't think you see too much of it in college basketball, but it's very, very effective. And to me, I'm not worried about the defensive side of the ball when it comes to Florida State at all. It's where's the scoring going to come from? And Tio, you kind of touched on this guy a little bit. I think it ends up being Caleb Mills that is the guy that kind of takes that scoring load. Because I'll tell you what, man, watching him at Houston the last couple of years like that kid can go out and he can get a bucket if you need a bucket. And I think that is something where Florida State's kind of been missing it a little bit, right, over the last couple of years, Tio?
Well, they tried to get MJ Walker to be that guy, but he wasn't efficient enough to really garner that kind of respect from other teams. But Caleb Mills comes in a lot different. I mean, he scored over 400 points his freshman season. His sophomore year, he got there and things just didn't click. I mean, I don't know what it was, whether it was him, whether it was whatever was going on at Houston. But this is a guy who can get a bucket quick, and he's really going to thrive beside guys who could push the ball, because that's when he's best at finding spots in transition and running the wing. He's a special talent. And the crazy part is he's going to be the smallest guy on the floor for Florida State at 6'4", and he's got such a high release point that there's not going to be many people in college basketball that's going to be able to guard him, especially with all the rim attack guys. And not to mention, he's just such a fantastic shooter from the perimeter as well.
Yeah, I think they're just going to have to go about it a different way. You know, Scotty could get to the rim in those moments. Trent Forrest, when he was there, he could just back point guards down. He controlled the ball. So he was so strong with the dribble in the paint that he could get those high percentage shots. Caleb Mills is exactly what Tio's saying. I mean, he's a guy, he's a shot maker, can just get his shot wherever he wants. From what we heard during the summer when he was in playing pickup with the pro guys, the Vassell's and Terrence Manns and those guys, when they came back, they were like, this this guy's a pro. I mean, right as soon as they played with him. And so, yeah, I think he's going to be the guy in crunch time. When they have to get a basket, he's going to be the guy.
So the other transfer that's coming in is Cameron Fletcher from Kentucky. Ibra, what are you hearing about him and whether or not he's going to have an impact this season? Because he was a top 30 prospect coming out of high school. Like that was a kid that had some level of expectation coming into college.
Yeah, to me, he's the big wild card because, from what I hear, they love him and it's worked out well. It's a good fit. Leonard Hamilton is a unique head coach, man. He can reach guys. And we know that Cameron had some issues at Kentucky. It didn't work out there, but man, from what we hear, they've got a really good relationship. I've heard Leonard Hamilton's going to be a good fit for him. And if he becomes the guy that people thought he could be out of high school, yeah, that could be a really nice piece to this team. If he isn't, I still think they can be successful, but I think he's a big wild card.
I thought he was a little bit out of position at Kentucky. They were trying to make him out of a rim attack guy. What he is in his truest form is a 3-and-D guy. He's got a big body, he's long arms, good looking jump shot. If he's able to settle into that role, and he's going to be able to, if he gets a lot of minutes beside Caleb Mills, he doesn't have to be the focal point. What he can focus on is being that elite defender because of his athleticism and being a catch and shoot guy that, quite frankly, is what he's meant to do. He could have a lot of success. He is talented. I think the change of scenery is going to be very good for Fletcher.
Well, and just to interrupt real quick, what they need a shooter.
Yes.
I mean, this is a team that, that's going to be one of the things you need to look for with this team is Anthony Polite can knock down the stand-up three. Can't really do it on the move. Same thing with Wyatt Wilkes. I mean, they need a guy that can shoot the ball. They need another guy that can shoot the ball well from the perimeter. And if he can do that, that would be huge for them.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, asking him to do a specific job like that is something that is going to be really good for guys kind of in that second start, right? Or trying to get their second chance. Don't make it too complicated. Go out there and guard the position you're supposed to guard. Go out there, do what you're supposed to do on that end of the floor, and then just stand in the corner and make open threes when you get them, because you're going to get them. And I think kind of going back to the basics almost is really good for guys in that situation, right, Tio?
Well, make him a laser and not a flashlight. Give him exactly what he needs to be. And with his shooting ability, it doesn't make any sense for him to do anything else. And here's the thing. They have enough playmaking that he's going to get some backdoor cuts for dunks. He's going to have some highlight type plays. But as long as he's focused on the right things, he's going to end up being he's going to end up being very good for Coach Hamilton. I think he just focused on too much stuff. Well, I need to do this. I need to do this. And we talk about it all the time, especially with some of these kids that come back instead of going to the draft. They're like, well, I have to prove this. No, do what you do. And what he does is make shots. Focus on that and everything else will come.
Yeah, and I think the situation at Kentucky last year with the way that they had to have as much youth as many new faces that they had in that roster. And like with anybody dealing with everything, the isolation through a COVID college basketball season was just, it was not an ideal. And I think that's why you see so many people getting restarted.
Yeah, and Kentucky didn't have a guy that was going to get into the paint and pitch out. If Kentucky asked you if he was getting into the paint, he was going up with it. Boston, if he got into the paint, he's going up with it. Fletcher needs some shots manufactured for him, not necessarily the other way around.
So, Ira, let me ask you this. We've talked about a lot of guys on this roster, but it goes 12 deep, and they're probably going to end up playing 12 guys this season. Who is one of those players that are kind of on the bench that you're expecting to have a big impact role?
Well, two guys I think are really important if they can come through, and I don't think either one's a guarantee. But I think Tenor Nagam and Tio mentioned the big guys earlier. I'm really looking for the Stan Jones bump in year two. Stan Jones, assistant coach for Florida State, has done a tremendous job. He's been with Leonard Hamilton since his days at Miami, does a great job with big men. He develops those guys. And sometimes you'll see a guy make a huge jump after 1 year to the second year. Tenor came in as an older guy. He was a postgraduate guy last year. He's coming back again. I'm really excited to see if he can take that next step. And then Raekwon Evans, point guard, backup point guard. He's a guy that they really think there's a lot more potential there that we haven't seen. Sometimes I don't know if it's a confidence issue. I'm not sure exactly what goes on with him. But he's a guy, again, another guy that you could bring off the bench and get some points. He finds a nice job of scoring around the rim, even though he's a point guard. To me, those are two guys that they'll be key as well. They won't be frontline guys, but I think they really could be key.
Well, the interesting thing about Tenor Ngam is he turned down UConn in order to go play in Canada. And then he comes down, he shoots the ball well from the free throw line. He shoots north of, I think, 85%. I think the number is really high. So he's got good hands. He's got quick feet. He's got a lot of offensive tools. I just wonder who's going to be the guy that can assert himself around the rim, because Florida State's always had a guy like that. Whether you look back when I play with Solomon Alabi or Balsa Koprivica, there's always a guy or two that is a presence, and they're going to need that from him because, quite frankly, behind him, it's a lot of unproven stuff. I mean, Quincy Ballard, is he there yet? Probably not. Naheem McLeod, I mean, he's a JUCO transfer, had big numbers, but he didn't play a lot at the JUCO level. So it's kind of like you need one guy. Can he be that guy? And that could end up being the X factor for Florida State.
And I also think, if he can't do it, I think the next best option is to go small and play Malik Osborne inside. And he can do that. And he might be more comfortable down there. But there are some limitations when you go small as well.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting if you can play Malik at the 5, so to speak, with John Butler on the floor out there as well. All of a sudden, a lot of guys that play on the perimeter, but you still are playing a lineup that has a 7-footer and a 6'9" guy. So it's not exactly small ball. Let's end it with this. Florida State has been as successful as any of the power programs in the ACC over the last couple of years. Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Syracuse. T.O., what would you call that?
A new blood, son. New blood. CY's been screaming new blood at me for the past 5 years. New blood.
You put it on a T for him.
That's right.
Well, listen, guys, I appreciate the time. This was fun. And here's to hoping that Florida State can end up having another season like we've come to expect out of them. For Irish Schoffel of warchant.com and Terrence Oglesby of the Dauster TO and Fanta podcast. Thanks, gentlemen.